We've been bringing you live coverage from the United States. Remember, voting in the midterms is currently underway. Huge stakes at the moment. In a nutshell, or very simplistically, this is like a parliamentary election. All 435 members of the House of Representatives will be chosen, and also a third of the Senate up for grabs. So it's not the executive. President Donald Trump will stay in place, but this determines the checks and balances, whether he will be able to push his agenda through the House and through the Senate. Let's go to Kate Fisher. She's in Virginia at a polling station, our correspondent there. Kate, so we're hearing about huge turnout, a lot of enthusiasm right now.
Absolutely. I arrived here at this polling station in Northern Virginia at 6 o'clock this morning, in the rain, in the dark, and yet there was still a queue of people waiting outside to try to get in to cast their ballot, and there has been a steady stream here all morning. There does feel like there is energy in the air. I spotted a couple taking a selfie in front of the polling booth sign, and with their stickers saying "I have just voted" very proudly. I spoke to one woman who was actually in tears. She's only been an American citizen for 5 years, and this is the second time she's had the opportunity to vote. She was born in Uganda and says it just gives her such joy that she's in a country where politicians are encouraging people to get to the polls and use their democratic right to vote. And she said the whole experience brought her to tears. So yes, lots of enthusiasm, because the stakes in this election really are very high.
I'm sure she's not happy with the video, the campaigning message that's been removed from even Fox by the Republicans. It was produced, some saying it was racist.
Yeah, that's right. There have been some really vicious campaigns in this election. Both sides are really putting everything into it, and that has resulted in some of the most aggressive television campaigns we've seen, and also the most money being poured into the campaigns. We've seen huge amounts of money spent on advertising on both sides, and those adverts really have been very vicious indeed, as you say, on both sides.
Where does Virginia fit in, Kate, in terms of the balance of power between the two main parties, the Republicans and the Democrats?
Well, currently the entire US Congress is governed by the Republican Party, as well, of course, as the White House. President Trump is a Republican. This election is so important because the Democrats have a very good chance of taking back control of the lower house, the House of Representatives. They need to take 23 seats, and they are, if you believe the polls, which of course is not always advisable after a few past examples we've had, but if the polls are correct, they will win those seats and they will take back control of the lower house of Congress, which means they will then have more ability to put checks and balances on the executive power of President Trump, and also, of course, stop much of his agenda from passing through the houses of Congress, which means anything he wants to get passed into law will struggle because the Democrats will have hold of that lower house. The polls suggest it's much less likely that the Democrats will manage to take back control of the Senate, which is the upper house. They do have a chance, of course, but it seems much less likely that they will get the seats they need to do that, which will mean that the Republicans still have some one house of Congress in control, but it is not the one that the fact that they will perhaps lose the lower house will mean that President Trump really will struggle to get his legislative agenda through.
And what's the situation in Virginia, finally, Kate?
Well, in this particular district where voting is taking place, the senator on the ballot is the Democratic senator is Tim Kaine, who you may remember his name because he was the running mate of Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential election. This is a very Democratic area, this part of Northern Virginia, and it's highly likely that he will get re-elected again. So this isn't particularly interesting as a race, but just down the road in the 10th congressional district here in Virginia and the 7th, there are some really interesting races that analysts are looking at closely, because the polls here open first, because we're on the east coast of the US, and they will give early indications as to whether that blue wave, whether that Democratic surge is actually happening. In the 10th congressional district, incumbent Republican Barbara Comstock is facing a really strong challenge from the Democrat female again, Jennifer Wexton. Things are very tight there, and it would be a big upset for the Republicans if Barbara Comstock lost her place to the Democrat. Republicans have held it for 40 years. And then in the 7th congressional district, it's currently held by a Tea Party Republican, so quite a far-right Republican. He is now neck and neck with his Democratic challenger, female again, Abigail Spanberger. So that again is a very interesting race to watch, and most analysts will be looking closely to the results of both of them to see whether this blue wave will actually happen.
All right, so huge turnouts. People from both sides have been rallied, perhaps by President Donald Trump himself. Thank you very much, Kate Fisher from Arlington, Virginia, a polling station there. We take a short break. We'll be back with more sporting.